Part 2 of selections on the topic of negative emotions, as quoted from Peter Ouspensky in his book, The Fourth Way. Question: is there any reason why we are so anxious to keep negative emotions? Ouspensky: habit. We are too accustomed to them, and we cannot sleep without them. What would many people do without negative emotions? This habit is so strong that special work is necessary to get rid of them. But in the beginning, work on negative emotions is twofold: studying them and trying not to express them. Real work on negative emotions comes later. You cannot study them if you express them. If you try to stop expressing them, then you can see them and study them. Question: is not changing one's point of view a method of struggling with them? Ouspensky: quite right, only it is not sufficient by itself. Real struggle begins with struggling with identification. If you destroy identification, negative emotions will become weaker by themselves. But of course, change of points of view is also very necessary. Question: I understood you to say that struggling with negative emotions is useless, but we must study and observe them. Is this correct? Ouspensky: struggle with negative emotions needs very many efforts because the habit is too strong. At first, you must simply study and attempt to struggle with the expression of negative emotions. In time, indirectly, one can gain mastery over emotions, but the first step is study. Question: about the right work of the centers, I do not see how you can prevent the emotional center from interfering with the work you're trying to do with the intellectual center. Ouspensky: it interferes all the time. You can do nothing about it until you have conquered negative emotions and have learned not to identify. When you cease to identify, negative emotions cease to have power because they work only on the basis of identification. Question: when you feel an unpleasant emotion, why is it necessary not to express it? Ouspensky: the idea is to create resistance, otherwise we cannot observe. And this creation of resistance is the introduction to the study of emotions. We cannot see them without it. Question: if I do not express unpleasant emotions, is it good to bottle them up? Ouspensky: try. You must not believe anything. If you find that it is good to express them, we will argue. I will then say that you cannot control this expression, and that if you observe, you will find that it is better not to express them. The question is, can you refrain from expressing them? Much time and many other things besides are necessary in order really not to express unpleasant emotions. Question: why is it that it gives a feeling of relief to express anger or irritation? Ouspensky: there is a worm in you that wants to express itself. Then when it expresses itself, you feel relief. But in this way it becomes stronger and has more and more control over you. When you realize that nobody else is responsible for your irritation, little by little you will begin to feel differently. We have much more power over the expression of negative emotions than we think, and we can learn not to express them. Question: may not restraint from expressing negative emotions, commonly described as letting off steam, have a harmful effect? Ouspensky: there is no danger. We cannot produce a restraint sufficiently strong to harm ourselves. Letting off steam as relief is an illusion. It makes us lose energy. Expression of negative emotions is always mechanical, so it can never be useful. But resistance to it is conscious. Question. If we are not to have negative emotions, this will abolish all of our emotional life. Ouspensky. Quite the opposite. Now we have no emotional life, but only an imitation. The idea is to have an emotional life. Real possibilities of knowing are in the emotional center. Question. The same amount of exhaustion is incurred by controlling as by releasing negative emotions. What then can I gain by trying to control the expression of anger? Ouspensky. It is quite a wrong assumption that it is the same amount of energy, because control increases energy. It may be that you have to expend a certain amount of energy to control some emotion, but next moment, since you do not spend energy on this useless emotion, control will increase your energy. This is the chemical action of control. Question. My experience is that suppressing the expression of a negative emotion makes one tired. Ouspensky. You can become tired if you only suppress the expression. But I never said suppress. I said do not express. Find reasons for not expressing. Suppression can never help, because sooner or later the negative emotion will jump out. If you merely suppress, you keep the identification and only shut off the external expression. It is a question of finding reasons, of thinking rightly, because expression of negative emotions is always based on some kind of wrong thinking. Question. I should like to get more help about tackling negative emotions. Ouspensky. It must be your own effort. And first of all, you must study your negative emotions and classify them. You must find which negative emotions you chiefly have, why they come, what brings them, and so on. You must understand that your only control over our emotions is by mind. But this is not immediate. If you begin to think rightly today, it will not change your negative emotions tomorrow. But if you think rightly for 6 months, then it will affect negative emotions. Question. When I think about negative emotions, I understand that they're in myself, and yet soon after I continue to express them. Is this simply because I am not unified? Ouspensky. First, yes, because you are not one. And second, because you do not try in the right way. It is a question of long work, and this cannot be changed at once. If one has constant negative emotions, recurring negative emotions of the same kind, one always falls in at the same point. If you observed yourself better, you would know that this was coming, or had come. And if you had thought about it rightly beforehand, you would have some resistance. But if you have no right attitude, if you do not think rightly, then you're helpless. And the negative emotion happens again at the same time, in the same way. This is one of the methods of controlling emotions through the intellectual center. But attitudes must be created not at the moment of emotional explosion, but long beforehand. Then, little by little, emotional explosions will come under the control of the intellect. This is because thoughts can be more permanent than feelings, and in that way thoughts can influence feelings. You can create permanent thoughts, permanent attitudes, which will affect feelings over time. But before this can become possible, a certain discipline must be introduced into our emotions, and a certain knowledge must be acquired to work on the emotional mind. Question. In some cases, the negative emotion of fear seems useful. Otherwise, people would cross the road at any time without looking. Ouspensky. You speak about instinctive fear. Emotional fear is different. It is based on imagination. Question: do negative emotions have a harmful effect on our other functions? Ouspensky: you must find that out for yourself. For instance, if you're agitated or irritated or something like that, notice other things. Can you remember well? Can you think well? Work well? You will see that all your faculties are diminished. This observation will by itself show you many other things to observe. Question: why is it that negative emotions appear to affect the function of the instinctive center to such a degree? Ouspensky: negative emotions affect all the centers. The four centers are so connected that you cannot have a strong or violent negative emotion. And with the help of identification, they all become strong. You cannot have a negative emotion at the same time do something else right or even think rightly. You eat wrongly, breathe wrongly, walk wrongly, work wrongly, everything. Question: are then negative emotions a wrong use of the instinctive center? Ouspensky: no, but all emotions have their origin in the instinctive center. Negative emotions are created from material that is taken from the instinctive center. This material legitimately belongs to the instinctive center and is wrongly borrowed from it. We are in a very strange state because positive emotions do not belong to our ordinary emotional center, but to what the system calls the higher emotional center. And negative emotions do not belong to the ordinary emotional center, but exist in an artificial center. The emotional center borrows material from the instinctive center, and with the negative half of the instinctive center, and with the help of imagination and identification, it creates negative emotions. Destroying them is very difficult work, but you must realize that as long as negative emotions exist, no development is possible, because development means development of all there is in man. Negative emotions cannot develop. It would be disastrous if they could. So if one is trying to create consciousness, one must at the same time struggle with negative emotions, for either you keep them or you develop. You cannot have both together.